The House will come to order. This morning, the pledge will be said by Kyle Schmidt from Sheridan Green Elementary in Westminster, Colorado.
Will you please join me for the pledge? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, for liberty and justice for all.
Great job, Logan.
Mr. Randall, please call the roll.
Representatives Arndt, Baisley, Benavides, Excused. Thank you. Excused. Bird. Bockenfeld. Buck. Buckner. Winsale. Caravale. Carver. Catlin. Champion. Coleman. Coleman. Excused. Cutter. Duran. Askar. Exum. Froelich. Garnett. Garnett. Excused. Geithner. Gonzalez Gutierrez. Gray. Herod. Herod. Excused. Holtorf. Hooten. Hooten. Excused. Humphrey. Humphrey. Excused. Jackson.
Jackson is excused.
Harkes Lewis. Kennedy. Kennedy. Kip. Graf-Tharp. Landgraf. Good morning. Larson. Liston. Lontine. McCluskey. McKean. McKean.
McKean is excused.
McLaughlin. Melton. Michelson Janae. Mollica. Neville. Pelton. Ransom. Rich. Roberts. Roberts.
McKean is present. Roberts is excused.
Sane. Sandridge. Singer. Sirota. Snyder. Soper. Sullivan. Tipper. Titone. Valdez A. Valdez D. Van Winkle. Wiseman. Will. Williams. Williams. Representative Benavides is present. Representative Roberts is present. Excused. Wilson. Wilson. Woodrow. Young. Madam Speaker.
Here. With 55 present and 10 excused, we have a quorum. Representative Snyder.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I move the Journal of Tuesday, March 3rd, 2020 be approved as corrected by the Chief Clerk.
You all have heard the motion. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed say no. It just makes me laugh every morning. The motion passes. Members, can we please have your attention? Please be quiet in the chamber. Representative Landgraf.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Members, some of you may know this. This weekend, former Assistant Minority Leader Polly Lawrence's husband, RJ, passed away. I have spoken to her, and she gave me permission to announce this today. I know that RJ, many of you knew him. He was up here frequently. He was not only a wonderful husband to Polly, but he was a friend, a companion, and a true partner in everything they did. I know he'll be missed terribly by his entire family, their children, Ann and Scott. And if you, we have her address if anybody wants to send a note or a card. I'm sure she would appreciate it. I don't know when the services are yet, but we will announce that as they come forward. And I would ask for a moment of silence.
A moment of silence is granted.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Representative Landgraf. Announcements and introductions. Representative Wilson? No. Representative Humphrey? No. Anyone? Oh, Representative Gray will take me up.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Transportation and local government, we will meet at 1:30 today in room LSBA. I'll note House Bill 1151 has been removed from the calendar and will be next week, but today we have 1320, 1282, and House Bill 1170 for action only. Thank you.
Representative Holtorf.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Thank you, esteemed colleagues. Most of you may not be aware that today is National Hug a GI Day. Now, what does that mean? Gather around your servicemen and women to give them a hug. It's a simple way to show your support with either a pat on the back or a hearty handshake. Be sure to give a past or present GI your appreciation. While GIs refer to Army personnel, the day encompasses all those serving in the military, including jarheads, wingnuts, squids, and coasties. Today, the term GI is commonly known to refer to those serving in the armed forces of the United States. It seems at the turn of the 20th century, GI was a notion that was used in supply records for galvanized iron. Not surprisingly, sarcastic usage of this term was used by many service members. It's a very Americana thing, GI, and it's part of our history, our legacy, and our heritage as Americans. In our history, the term G.I. Joe was born. His creator, comic strip artist, and former Army Sergeant David Berger issued his first G.I. Joe in 1942 in Yank magazine. The term GI became more permanently entrenched in American language in 1944 by one of our greatest presidents, President Franklin Roosevelt. He signed the bill that became known as the GI Bill, Servicemen's Readjustment Act. So please consider thanking your veterans and your service members on Hug a GI Day, and never forget that freedom is not free. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
Representative Buckner and Wilson.
Colleagues, you need to shape up. We have a group of phys ed folks here. Their group is named SHAPE. So shape up and pay attention to my colleague, Representative Buckner.
Thank you, Representative Wilson. The Society of Health and Physical Education, Colorado, which is SHAPE, is a nonprofit organization composed of hundreds of educators and advocates. Their mission is to provide leadership, professional development, and advocacy for health, physical education, recreation, and dance professionals in the state of Colorado. Representative Wilson and I were co-prime sponsors on a pilot program where SHAPE is involved, and it's a education instruction pilot program that was supported in both chambers. and we're going to get physical education back into the schools. So could we have those representing SHAPE today please stand up? And I want to make sure later on you get a look at their amazing sneakers.
Representative Olson.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Colleagues, if you missed any of what Representative Buckner said, here's the bottom line. If you'd have paid more attention to your PE instructors when you were growing up, you wouldn't be paying all those big bucks to gyms today. So be sure to thank them for their efforts. Thank you.
Representative Kraftart.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I have two announcements. The first is, remember, lunch today at the Brown Palace with the Colorado Baking Association. And I think Matt Gray, Representative Gray, they're giving us money? Tons of money it will be given away. So that's noon at the Brown Palace. And then at 1:30 is the Business Affairs and Labor Committee in room 107, where we will be hearing 4 bills. House Bill 1293, House Bill 1306, Senate Bill 078, and Senate Bill 086. And everybody is welcome to come. It'll be a pretty exciting day.
Representative Longteam.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. And Representative Kraft-Tharp, I would go to your hearing, but I have a hearing also. So darn. Members of the Health and Insurance Committee, we have our afternoon hearing today, 1:30 in room 112. We're hearing House Bill 1221 and 1319. Certainly would welcome anyone who wants to join us for all the fun.
Representative Esgar.
Members, the real exciting day of fun will be Friday morning, 8 a.m., appropriations. Check your calendar. You may have a bill on there. If you're not there, you will be laid over.
Representative Catlin. Representative Catlin, it's an honor to serve with you.
Well, it's a bigger honor to serve with you, Madam Speaker. I have a tribute today that I'd like to have read at length.
Please proceed.
The House of Representatives, convened in the 72nd General Assembly, hereby extends sincere commendations to Dr. Gayle Frazetta. In recognition of her decades-long commitment to the people of Colorado, Dr. Gayle Frazetta has been awarded the 2020 COPIC Humanitarian Award. This award is presented each year to honor physicians for volunteer medical services and contributions to the community and who unassumingly volunteer outside the spectrum of their day-to-day lives. For over 20 years, Dr. Frazetta has provided health care for thousands of people in the Montrose area. She doesn't simply provide for the community, she also raises up members of the community by equipping them with knowledge. Dr. Frazetta is a model citizen, physician, and community member who has given her time, her knowledge, and her resources to the people of Colorado. The members of the Colorado House of Representatives are proud to recognize Dr. Gayle Frazetta for her dedicated leadership and thank her for her exemplary contributions to her community. Tribute on request of Representative Mark Catlin, given this 4th day of March 2020, State Capitol in Denver.
Representative Catlin.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I'm honored today to have a friend of mine and a professional from my hometown, Dr. Gayle Frazetta. I mentioned she's a friend. She raised 3 boys over there that were compatriots of the boy that's standing over there beside her. And she had a lot to say about how they got raised, believe me. She minded her kids and minded mine a lot of the time too. But as a professional, she's a community-minded medical professional whose dedication and commitment to Montrose and to the western slope of Colorado has given countless volunteer hours in spearheading and improving the rural track for medical students and fostering a local scholarship program. She did that on her own. Dr. Frazetta has served on multiple hospital boards and community boards to educate and promote the importance of the medical field within rural communities and support of health services in Montrose schools. Dr. Frazetta has succeeded in making a lasting and permanent change in our community. She also coined a phrase this morning that I want to share, and I want to give her credit. We talked about rural hospitals this morning, and maybe this is something people can get in their mind. Rural hospitals are becoming an endangered species in the state of Colorado. So if you hear me say that again, it's because she gave me that phrase. And it's really very, very true. Please join me in welcoming her and her husband to the capital of the state of Colorado, Dr. Gayle Frazetta.
Thank you for joining us today. Representative Larson and Byrd.
Perfect. Thank you, Madam Speaker. We have a tribute, and we would like for Mr. Randall to read it at length.
The House of Representatives convened in the 72nd General Assembly hereby extends sincere commendations to the Colorado Hospital Association. Colorado hospitals stand at the ready 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, 365 days a year to provide compassionate, life-saving care. They have provided more than 1.8 million emergency room visits, 423,000 inpatient discharges, 10.1 million outpatient visits, and delivered more than 57,000 babies in the year of 2018. Each hospital is prepared to care for everything from broken arms and appendicitis to natural disasters, mass casualty events, and global pandemics. Colorado hospitals are bedrock institutions in our communities, employing more than 96,000 employees statewide and serving as the largest employer in 11 of 14 regions of the state. Collectively, they have led the charge for and fund the state's share of Medicaid expansion, which provides health care coverage for nearly 400,000 Coloradans. Each hospital has demonstrated a commitment to improving patient safety and the quality of care, tackling readmission, hospital-acquired conditions, infection prevention, and more. Colorado hospitals have been on the front lines of the opioid epidemic, treating Coloradans experiencing addiction and leading the charge to reduce the number of Coloradans who become addicted. Tribute on request of Representatives Colin Larson and Shannon Byrd, given this 4th day of March 2020, State Capitol in Denver.
Representative Byrd.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. And members, it is my privilege to be able to present this tribute today to Colorado's hospitals. So I'll just mention in a previous life, I worked for a hospital here in Colorado on the business side of matters. And there I was able to see all of the philanthropy that my particular hospital was engaged in. And I know that the community of Colorado's hospitals engages in millions of dollars of philanthropy in their local communities across the state every single year. I was also able to witness the millions of dollars of free health care that they gave, philanthropic health care that they were able to give to indigent patients. Our Colorado hospitals are major centers of job creation. They have immense economic impact throughout our state and make contributions, I think, above and beyond what we think of on a typical day. So thank you so much to all of our Colorado hospitals, everything that you do to take care of us in our times of greatest need, and everything that you contribute to our state.
Representative Larson.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. And I just wanted to remind members that today is Hospitals on the Hill Day, and there will be a luncheon at the Knights of Columbus building, which is at 1555 Grant Street from 12 to 1 today. So hope to see you there.
Thank you, members. Representative Singer and Jaquez Lewis.
Thank you, Madam Speaker, and I believe Representative Sane may want to join us as well. We have a tribute that we would like to have read at length.
State of Colorado in memoriam. The House of Representatives convened in the 72nd General Assembly hereby extends sincere condolences and expressions of sympathy to the Wilson family on the passing of Fred Wilson. The state of Colorado has lost an exceptional citizen with the passing of Fred Wilson, former mayor and city council member of Longmont. He passed away on January 10th at the age of 74. Mr. Wilson was a great listener, a thoughtful speaker, and was fiercely committed to serving the needs of his community. In addition to being a lifelong public servant, Mr. Wilson was also a talented woodworker, husband, a father, a grandfather, and a friend to many. He will be dearly missed. The members of the House of Representatives express their heartfelt condolences to the family and friends of Mr. Fred Wilson and thank him for his service to his community and to the state of Colorado. on request of Representatives Jonathan Singer, Sonia Jaquez Lewis, and Lori Sane, given this 4th day of March 2020, State Capitol in Denver.
Representative Singer.
Thank you, Madam Speaker, and thank you, members, for your attention, and feel free to be seated as well. I'm not going to take a lot of time today on the House floor, but we are joined by Mayor Wilson's family members today, and I wanted to just share with you a few brief thoughts. You know, Longmont was not always known as the fastest growing city in the country. Wasn't always known as a hub for commerce and intellect and art. But there are people that showed up that didn't just have a vision, but a vision about how we treat people. And the way that Mayor Wilson ensured that when he was elected mayor, actually I'm going to roll back and say before he was elected mayor, when he showed up to city council and saw that, well, some of the things that sometimes I can probably blame myself for as well happen, where people show up and you kind of listen, but you kind of don't listen. Then you look at your, well, not iPad in 1989, but look at your notepad in 1989, and then look back up. He was appalled. And he decided that real representative democracy involves citizen input and respect for those citizens. And so he made sure to do that as mayor and made sure that everyone was included. The other thing that I'll say is that I don't ever remember him making a long speech. If there was ever a filibuster, his name was not associated with it. He looked at the issue, he made his decision about the facts, he said what needed to be said in about a sentence, and that was it. And now look at our community. It's one of those most thriving communities in the Front Range, in Colorado, and that doesn't happen by accident. It happens because people show up and do something. I'm going to let my other colleagues share their thoughts and feelings, and then I will introduce the family.
Representative Jaquez Lewis.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I never had the honor of meeting Mayor Wilson, but one of the things that struck me as I was reading about his life is his commitment to his creative side. He was an amazing woodworker. I saw some pictures of the woodworking bowls and Western Collective. It was very impressive. And one of the quotes that struck me when I was reading about his life is he's a gentle, patient leader who was never afraid to move the conversation forward. So I want to honor his family and his service in the Navy. Marianne, thank you for being here, and we're very glad that we could commemorate his life.
Representative Sane.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. And I also didn't know Mayor Wilson, but when reading about his life, he really sets an example for others, because to be a leader, you must first be a servant. And so he always put others ahead of himself, especially his constituents. And that's something that we should all take some note of today. So thank you so very much for being here, and we feel so sorry for your loss.
Representative Singer.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. And so joining us today, if you'd like to stand up now, we are joined by the family of former Mayor Wilson here. He's survived by his son, Dan Wilson, and his wife, Arena, and as well as Marianne Wilson, who they met at the sink in Boulder. So we got more applause for the sink than we do some of my bills already. So, and also by 5 grandchildren. And I just want to say to all of you, in this world, we want to thank you for sharing him with us and with our community. We know that it is not only a sacrifice for those who serve, but for the family members of those who serve, who don't get as much quality time and family time. But you made a better community for all of us, and I hope we can all enjoy that and remember that the next time. And please join me in welcoming them to the Capitol today.
Any other announcements or introductions? That brings us to third reading of bills, final passage. Mr. Randall, please read the title of Senate Bill 17.
Senate Bill 17 by Senator Winter, also Representatives Rep. Gray, concerning a requirement that the high-performance transportation enterprise include information about its public-private partnerships in the annual report of the legislative committees of the House of Representatives and the Senate have jurisdiction over transportation.
Majority Leader Garnett.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I move for the passage of Senate Bill 17 on third reading and final passage.
The question before us is the passage of Senate Bill 17 on third reading and final passage. Is there any discussion? Seeing none, Mr. Randall, please open the machine and members please vote. Representatives Baisley and Catlin. Here comes Catlin. That's a $2 fine. Oh, Representative Baisley, that's a $3 fine. Please close the machine. With 63 aye votes, 1 no vote, and 1 excused, Senate Bill 17 is passed. Yeah. Was that a mistake? Co-sponsors. Please close the machine. Please read the title of House Bill 1102.
House Bill 1102 by Representatives Tipper and Sobrow, Senators Lee and Priola, concerning required procedures to protect the defendant when jailhouse witnesses are used in a criminal case and in connection therewith making an appropriation.
Majority Leader Garnett.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I move for the passage of House Bill 1102 on third reading and final passage.
The question before us is the passage of House Bill 1102 on third reading and final passage. Is there any discussion? Seeing none, please open the machine and members please vote. Please close the machine. With 37 aye votes, 27 no votes, and 1 excused, House Bill 1102 is passed. Co-sponsors. Please close the machine. Please read the title of House Bill 1301.
House Bill 1301 by Representative McLaughlin, House Senator Sonnenberg, concerning electronic attendance in meetings of school district boards of education.
Majority Leader Garnett.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I move for the passage of House Bill 1301 on third reading and final passage.
The question before us is the passage of House Bill 1301 on third reading and final passage. Is there any discussion? Seeing none, please open the machine and members please vote. Please close the machine. With 55 aye votes, 9 no votes, and 1 excused, House Bill 1301 is passed. Co-sponsors. Please close the machine. Please read the title of Senate Bill 6.
Senate Bill 6 by Senators Zenzinger and Story, also Representatives Kipp and Baisley, concerning changes to the continuing administration of the Colorado Opportunity Scholarship Initiative.
Majority Leader Garnett.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I move for the passage, the final passage. I move for the passage of Senate Bill 6 on third reading and final passage.
The question before us is the passage of Senate Bill 6 on third reading and final passage. Is there any discussion? Seeing none, please open the machine and please vote. Benavidez. Please close the machine. With 52 aye votes, 12 no votes, and 1 excused, Senate Bill 6 is passed. Co-sponsors. Please close the machine. Mr. Randall, please read the title of Senate Bill 81.
Senate Bill 81 by Senators Danielson and Bridges, also Representative Sullivan and Larson, concerning including school information in the Colorado State Apprenticeship Resource Directory.
Majority Leader Garnett.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I move for the passage of Senate Bill 81 on third reading and final passage.
The question before us is the passage of Senate Bill 81 on third reading and final passage. Is there any discussion? Seeing none, please open the machine and members please vote. Larson. You should probably vote on your own bill. There you go. Please close the machine. With 64 aye votes, no votes, and 1 excuse, Senate Bill 81 is passed. Co-sponsors. Please close the machine. Please read the title of Senate Bill 123.
Senate Bill 123 by Senators Fields and Bridges, also Representatives Coleman and Harrod, concerning the rights of college athletes in connection with establishing the right to receive compensation for the use of their images, names, and likeness, and the right to obtain professional legal representation.
Majority Leader Garnett.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I move for the passage of Senate Bill 123 on third reading and final passage.
The question before us is the passage of Senate Bill 123 on third reading and final passage. Is there any discussion? Seeing none, please open the machine and members please vote. Please close the machine. With 55 aye votes, 9 no votes, and 1 excuse, Senate Bill 123 is passed. Co-sponsors. Please close the machine. Please read the title of House Bill 1225.
House Bill 1225 by Representatives Weissman and Cadlin, all Senators Fenberg and Quorum, concerning clarification of the requirement of reasonableness in charges imposed by one cooperative electric association upon another.
Majority Leader Garnett.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I move for the passage of House Bill 1225 on third reading and final passage.
The question before us is the passage of House Bill 1225 on third reading and final passage. Is there any discussion? Seeing none, members, please open the, Mr. Randall, please open the machine and members, please vote. Landgraf and Mullica, please close the machine. With 53 aye votes, 11 no votes, and 1 excused, House Bill 1225 is passed. Co-sponsors. Please close the machine. Please read the title of House Bill 1234.
House Bill 1234 by Representatives Valdez D. and Liston, all Senator Fields, concerning peace officer status for certain employees of the Department of Revenue.
Majority Leader Garnett.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I move for the passage of House Bill 1234 on third reading and final passage.
The question before us is the passage of House Bill 1234 on third reading and final passage. Is there any discussion? Seeing none, please open the machine and members please vote. Esgar. Please close the machine. With 46 aye votes, 18 no votes, and 1 excused, House Bill 1234 is passed. Co-sponsors. He actually lives in Clear Creek County, period. In Evergreen, period. Please close the machine. Please read the title of Senate Bill 64.
Senate Bill 64 by Senator Foote, also Representatives Sober and Tipper, concerning the repeal of prohibition on the state attorney general bringing an action under state antitrust law when certain corporate action has been reviewed by a federal entity.
Majority Leader Garnett.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I move for the passage of Senate Bill 64 on third reading and final passage.
The question before us is the passage of Senate Bill 64 on third reading and final passage. Is there any discussion? Seeing none, members, Mr. Randall, please open the machine and members, please vote. Rich, please close the machine. With 41 aye votes, 23 no votes, and 1 excused, Senate Bill 64 is passed. Co-sponsors. Please close the machine. Please read the title of Senate Bill 39.
Senate Bill 39 by Senators Fields and Story, also Representatives Valdez A. and Roberts, concerning updated accessibility signage in a state-owned facility.
Majority Leader Garnett.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I move for the passage of Senate Bill 39 on third reading and final passage.
The question before us is the passage of Senate Bill 39 on third reading and final passage. Is there any discussion? Seeing none, Mr. Randall, please open the machine and members, please vote. Ransom. Please close the machine. With 60 aye votes, 4 no votes, and 1 excuse, Senate Bill 39 is passed. Co-sponsors. Please close the machine. Please read the title of Senate Bill 79.
Senate Bill 79 by Senators Fields and Heisey, House Representative Valdez D. concerning the method of notifying people of Amber Alerts to promote the largest reach community notifications.
Majority Leader Garnett.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I move for the passage of Senate Bill 79 on third reading and final passage.
The question before us is the passage of Senate Bill 79 on third reading and final passage. Is there any discussion? Seeing none, please open the machine and members, please vote. Sandridge, please close the machine. With 64 aye votes, no votes, and 1 excuse, Senate Bill 79 is passed. Co-sponsors. Please close the machine. That brings us to General Order, second reading of bills. Representative Exum. You all have heard the motion. Seeing no objection, Representative Exum will take the chair.
The committee will come to order. With your unanimous consent, the bills will be read by title unless there's a request for reading the bill at length. Committee amendments will not be read unless requested, as they are printed in your bill folders. Floor amendments will be shown on the screen and on your iPads and not read unless requested. Bills will be laid over upon the motion of the majority leader, and the court rule is relaxed. Mr. Randall, please read the title to Senate Bill 83.
Senate Bill 83 by Senator Gonzalez, also Representative Harrod, concerning prohibiting civil arrest while on courthouse grounds.
Representative Harrod.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. It's an honor to serve with you.
Honor to serve with you.
I move Senate Bill 83.
To the bill. No committee report?
No committee report.
Okay, to the bill. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. This bill prohibits courthouse civil arrests. I ask for an aye vote.
Is there any further discussion? Yes. Representative Williams.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Senate Bill 83 is something that I certainly rise in opposition to, and I would ask any members of our Judiciary Committee who actually heard the bill in committee to come and share their thoughts. But I believe that, you know, this is something that we probably shouldn't involve ourselves in. Understanding during testimony there was a considerable amount of discussion about the reason for this is to essentially prohibit immigration enforcement from being able to do their job in a courthouse or within the surrounding vicinity. And I just want to caution everyone here right now that once we start doing these things, we do open ourselves up to, the state of Colorado does open ourselves up to litigation from the federal government. And we certainly just saw that, I believe, in the Second Circuit, where the court did declare that, you know, it's all right for the federal government to withhold taxpayer grant money to localities, to states that would try to skirt immigration enforcement. And so I believe that if we engage in this type of policy making right here...
Just a moment, Representative Williams, just a moment.
Yes.
Members, we're on second reading of bills. If you have conversations, please take them off to the side. Thank you very much. Please continue, Representative Williams.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Members, I just want to say that if we do engage in this type of policy making, we do open ourselves up to repercussions from the federal government, especially when it relates to taxpayer funds being allocated to us. And I also want to say that, you know, when it comes to the realm of immigration, the federal government does have broad authority, and there's very little that we should or could do for or against those efforts. So I would ask for a no vote on this. I think it's a bridge too far, and I think it does open us up to not only, again, the consequences I laid out with the federal government, but also public safety issues that are associated with it. So I would ask for a no vote, and I would certainly welcome my colleagues who are on the Judiciary Committee to, you know, share their input. Thank you.
Thank you, Representative Williams. Representative Carver.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Members, this bill does a number of things, all of which are problematic. In whether you're talking legal or process. It is certainly true that in the common law, and I suspect it is only Rep. Wiseman and I who find Blackstone's commentaries on the common law to be a constant thrill. Go, Rep. Wiseman. But suffice it to say that there is certainly a common law privilege against civil arrest that exists and that is part of every state's broad legal authority But members, as a matter of law, unless you can point to a court case to the contrary, but I think they all line up on this point. This bill attempts to take the common law privilege against civil arrest in court proceedings to block federal immigration enforcement. The state common law does not override federal authority pursuant to delegated powers under the U.S. Constitution. And the predominant case in this area is U.S. versus Arizona, who had attempted to write some specific provisions dictating federal immigration policies and enforcement. And the Supreme Court said this is the exclusive province of the federal government under delegated powers. You can't do this. The way the federal sovereign authority works, because we have two sets of sovereign government authority under our U.S. Constitution. The states can act within their reserved powers, which includes common law, in setting rules and practices on what happens within the state of Colorado. But that common law, and I would argue this bill, will have no legal effect on restricting federal enforcement authority as they carry out federal immigration law and enforcement. Now, this is certainly an area that is being highly litigated in various contexts, but there are specific cases that talk about state common law cannot override federal sovereign authority within the delegated powers, which includes immigration. So, as a matter of legality, this bill goes against current legal precedent. The other thing that I think is problematic from a process standpoint is the procedure it puts into place, which requires law enforcement, local, state, federal, you name it, to sign in before they come into a courthouse or its environs, the surrounding area, which includes the parking lot. So members, we have a really interesting procedure here where we are requiring now law enforcement to sign in and state their purpose before they're allowed into state, county, or municipal courthouses. And the court is required to keep this record. And if a law enforcement individual comes in with the purpose of making a civil arrest, maybe it's a civil arrest pursuant to Colorado law. And again, we're talking municipal, county, or state courts. Then there will be what reads to me personal liability. A cause of action will be authorized against the law enforcement officer for personal liability. So members, I find that procedural aspect not helpful, not what we should have in Colorado law, really an action against law enforcement at whatever level, attempting to do their job in enforcing the law, Remember, law enforcement isn't the ones that wrote the law. Law enforcement, including ICE, did not write immigration law. But what does the Constitution require of the President and the executive branch? It is the President's duty shall see that the laws are faithfully executed. And so the testimony in judiciary was pretty much focused on ICE attempting to carry out civil arrest warrants, which is their job. So, members, I rise in opposition to this bill. I think it is legally faulty. I think the process that it mandates and having law enforcement sign in and state their purpose anytime they go into a courthouse in Colorado or its environs and then be subject to personal liability. At least the language in the bill says that they face liability. It doesn't say against the department that employs them. It talks about the person being liable. To me, that reads personal liability. Ask for a no vote.
I had Representative Benavides next, Representative Balkanville, and I'll get you after that. Thank you. Representative Benavides.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Members, this is really a bill about our sovereign authority in this state. We have the sovereign authority to maintain the authority and dignity of our court system. That's our responsibility as a state. And that is something that is in common law. This is not a new concept, that every state has the right and the responsibility to maintain a well-functioning court and to respect the dignity of the court. That said, that's a common law right, but we went further in this state. We put it in statute at 2-4-211. We said that yes, the common law exists and it continues to exist in Colorado unless we, the legislature, specifically repeal aspects of it. We have not at all rescinded our authority to maintain and manage our courts. Certainly this is about arrests by ICE, but this is not about the uniform rule of naturalization. That is the right of the U.S. Federal government with regards to immigration. It's under our U.S. Constitution, Article 1, Section 4. No one disputes that the federal government has the authority over the uniform rule of naturalization. This has no part of that. This rule does not infringe in any way on the federal government's authority. This is about our right as a state. The 10th Amendment allows states to make decisions with regard to anything that is not in the Constitution. There is nothing in the U.S. Constitution that says that the United States government gets to control how our state courts operate. That's what this bill is about. If and the reason this is so important is because the courts are so important, because we do function as a rule of law. But if people are afraid or discouraged from coming to the courts, whether as a party to a case or whether as a witness to a case, then there's a problem if people won't get there. And it's in our interest, in the state's interest, to make sure that the courts are accessible. We have, under Article 2, Section 6 of our state constitution, we have a right to access of justice. And if people are afraid to come to courthouses, and they provided information on the increase over the last couple of years of arrests at courthouses. Courts cannot properly do their business if people are afraid to come to the court for fear of getting arrested. And this is specifically about civil immigration laws. So it is not about criminal. If someone, an ICE agent has a criminal warrant signed by a judge, nobody will stop them from going into the courthouse and arresting somebody. That exists. This bill walks a fine line with regards to our sovereign authority in this state. It is our responsibility that our courts are well functioning, well maintained, and that everybody has a right to access them. I think this is a great bill, and this is not a settled question, as my colleague mentioned. There is a lot of litigation going on, but all of them have so far found in favor of states having the authority to maintain their courts. So I urge a yes vote on this bill.
Thank you, Representative Benavides. Representative Carver.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Representative Benavides. Members, there are really two aspects of this bill. If you read the bill, you see that the word immigration does not appear. So while the testimony was very much about immigration, the handouts in the committee were about ICE and their presence of ICE officers coming to various courthouses in various counties. That was the focus of the committee testimony. But let me just talk about what this bill would do separate and apart from the immigration issue. Even though, as far as I can tell from the committee testimony, that is what's driving the bill. Here's what the bill does. Is it says, and I've already talked about, there is in common law, in Colorado law, this privilege against civil arrest. But members, do we really want to take that principle and enforce it by saying that law enforcement officers who have a civil arrest warrant, which covers a huge range of legal actions that can generate a civil arrest warrant. These can be local law enforcement, county, state, Colorado Bureau of Investigation, a whole range of law enforcement officers. Separate and apart from immigration, if they are being told by their employer to effect a civil arrest, they go now to the Denver courthouse. This bill says on page 5, line 9, an on-duty law enforcement officer who is not employed or contracted with courthouse security or participating in a court proceeding. So if they're like testifying in a court proceeding or if they're part of courthouse security, this bill does not affect them. But for every other purpose, every other law enforcement officer who comes into any courthouse in Colorado shall present credentials and state the purpose of their presence. They must sign in and say why they are there. Really? The court then is directed to maintain a record of this sign-in and their stated purpose. And then you go further down on page 5, starting on line 19. And it also talks about a person shall not be subject to civil arrest. That's on page 4. So now you have this interesting process that is being set up under this bill, where a law enforcement official who is presumably only showing up at the courthouse with the civil arrest warrant pursuant to their official duties, is directed and required to sign in and state their purpose. And then we're going to make them personally liable for damages. At least that's the way I read it. Lines 19 through 23. So that they are liable for damages in a civil action. Further, the Attorney General may bring a civil action on behalf of the people of Colorado against the law enforcement officer, who presumably is not acting on an individual whim, but pursuant to their official duties as part of a city police department, county sheriff's office, or state enforcement agency. This is what the bill does, separate and apart from the immigration issue. Why would we do this? So I think the bill is wrong just in that context. Now, again, the focus of the testimony in the community or in the committee was on ICE. ICE being present in the courthouses, but members understand the scope of this bill. The prohibition that is brought to bear here is not just their presence in the courthouse. It is in the environs surrounding the courthouse. On page 4, environs means the vicinity surrounding the courthouse, including, but not limited to, a sidewalk, driveway, entryway, green space, or parking area. Are we now saying that a law enforcement officer with a civil arrest warrant carrying out their official duties, who is in the parking lot next to the courthouse, is now caught up in the provisions of this bill? Apparently, that is what we're saying. So, members, I would urge a no vote on this bill. I certainly, it is part of Colorado law, as it is with other states, to have the common law privilege with regards to legal proceedings and the suspension of civil arrest. I respect that. This has implementing factors that I think are the wrong approach in what they're putting our law enforcement officials through, in making them sign in making them personally liable, presumably for carrying out their official duties. So I would ask for a no vote.
Thank you, Representative Carver. Representative Benavides.
Thank you, Madam. Thank you, Mr. Chair. I apologize. Members, with all due respect to my colleague, you know, I was racking my brain to figure out what is a civil arrest. And apart from arrests being undertaken for immigration, civil violations of immigration, I could not think of any. I even asked my colleague, Representative Weissman, and we could not think of any. Because generally, if you are violating civil law or presumed to be violating civil law, you are sued. You're not arrested for it. You're arrested for criminal violations. Now, ICE could have a warrant signed by a judge for a civil immigration violation, but they don't. They don't go to the judge, so they have a detainer signed by another ICE official, and that's what they base that on. So even though I agree the bill does not specifically speak to immigration, that is the most common civil arrest. I am not aware of any others. So I would also take issue with the question of paragraph 4 on page 5, where law enforcement, on-duty law enforcement officers must, doesn't say they have to sign in. It says that the people there must maintain a record of the information of who was there. And that's not really unheard of. When you have people that come through a courthouse, I think every courthouse, and I think every, because I don't know about all the small courthouses, but I think every courthouse now has magnetometers, and people have to say if they're carrying a weapon. And most on-duty law enforcement officers are carrying weapons. And so they have to let them know that they're there. So this is not unheard of. This is not an additional burden on on-duty law enforcement. And as far as the liability, the remedies are only with respect to paragraph 1 and paragraph 2. They are not for not signing in. They are only if an arrest is made, of a civil arrest, if it's made in the courthouse environs. And, you know, I would also say environs, it's important that that is clarified in this bill, because if everybody thought, oh, it's only the courtroom, it is not driving up and parking in the parking lot or walking into the building. It is still inhibiting the access to the courts, and that is not something we want to stand for in this state. It not only violates our common law protection on our court proceedings and our courthouses, but it violates our own state constitution with respect to access to justice. That's all this bill is about. ICE, if that's what they want to do, and arrest someone, they have the opportunity to do their homework and do that. All we're saying is it is more important to us in this state that our courts are accessible, that they're well maintained, and everybody feels like they can go there and participate. That's all this is saying. It is not stopping any other kind of enforcement or anything else. Again, members, I think this is a good bill, and I would encourage its support.
Thank you, Representative Benavides. Representative Carver.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Representative Benavides. First, you are right that the provision on liability for damages only applies if the person makes the civil arrest, and I didn't mean to imply otherwise. The language on the law enforcement officer and what they must do when they come into the courthouse, it says the law enforcement officer, and again it says on-duty law enforcement officer, so they're pursuant to their official duties, shall present credentials and state the purpose of the officer's presence to any existing courthouse security who shall maintain a record of the information. So that is the language of the bill, which, to my knowledge, is something that is not, that kind of record is not required or maintained now, to my knowledge. So I believe that is a new requirement, at least in those respects. So again, I just, the liability for damages for the law enforcement officer carrying out their duties, one might question if they're doing this pursuant to their official duties, then why are you doing personal liability? Which seems particularly inappropriate. So with that, again, I think this bill is not helpful to the process. I think it is more disruptive to proceedings, and ask for a no vote.
Thank you, Representative Carver. Representative Balkenfield.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. It's an honor to serve with you.
Honor to serve with you, sir.
I rise in opposition to this bill. I respect, honor, and I'm always concerned about the health, safety, and welfare of our military members, our law enforcement officers, and yes, our immigration officers. They all have very, very dangerous jobs, and they're here to serve the people in this country. The safest place to affect their job and make an arrest is a courthouse, because the folks in the courthouse, many times in Colorado, I believe it's required by law now, are secured before they enter the facility. So let's look at what the current policy is of the federal immigration officers. They're making arrests for people who have broken the law. The majority of these arrests are people who have broken the law. And that means they could be dangerous. It could be a minor law. It could be a substantial criminal law that was broken. But we need to provide for our law enforcement officers and immigration officers the most security protection, and the welfare of their families give them the most security protection to protect us as citizens of this country. I urge a no vote. This is really, really a bad bill. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Representative Balkenfield. Representative Geithner.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Members, we just heard from Representative Carver, and she was defining what environs mean. And I think it's important that we repeat that. So environs here, it's on page 4. This is the re-engrossed bill, lines 18 through 20. Means the vicinity surrounding a courthouse, including but not limited to a sidewalk, a driveway, an entryway, green space, or parking area serving the courthouse. And this language is throughout the bill. And I have concerns with that. And so I offer Amendment L004 and ask that it be displayed.
Amendment L004 has been properly moved and now displayed to the amendment. Representative Geithner.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And so, members, I think what we're seeing in this bill, Senate Bill 83, is essentially a sanctuary courthouse bill. And so I think if we remove this piece, it won't impede the ability for law enforcement to do and conduct the business that they have to conduct, that we have asked them to conduct. And so I would urge us to strike this section, which, like I said, is on page 4 and throughout the bill, and not make it what it appears to be, which is a sanctuary courthouse bill. Thank you, members.
Thank you, Representative Geithner. Representative Herrick.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you, members. I want to just correct a couple of things which I think are relevant to, or one thing which is relevant to this amendment. The facts that were stated that the majority of these arrests are for people who have committed crimes is just not true. It's not a real fact. We're talking about folks who are coming in because they're victims, but victims of domestic violence, victims of abuse possibly by a landlord, and are just trying to find justice. This amendment, while clever and artful, does gut the bill, so I ask for a no vote.
Representative Williams to the amendment L004.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I rise in support of this amendment. It certainly doesn't affect, the amendment doesn't affect the actual courthouse itself, and of course being inside the courthouse, but it does affect the surrounding areas. And I don't support the underlying bill at all anyway, but this seems like it'd be an appropriate sort of measured amendment that would still allow the bill proponents to have their say with respect to the courthouse and the inside operations of it. But to say that immigration enforcement officers can't do their job in the surrounding areas and the green space and the parking lot, I mean that goes way further than I think anyone reasonably could look at this and say that's acceptable. I don't see the opposition that should exist with this. Again, we're talking about the surrounding areas. We're not talking about the courthouse itself. We're talking about sidewalks, right? We're essentially saying that immigration enforcement can't do their job on a sidewalk next to the courthouse if this bill were to pass, absent this amendment. So it seems very reasonable to me. It still allows for the bill sponsors to have their way with the policy, but brings a little bit more balance to the bill itself. So I'd ask for a yes vote on this.
Thank you, Representative Williams. Any further discussion on Amendment L004? Seeing none, the question before us is the adoption of Amendment L004. All those in favor say aye. Aye. All opposed say no. No. Amendment L004 is lost. Back to the bill. Representative Williams.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I just want to echo the comments made by my colleague, Representative Carver, with respect to the liability aspect of this, and that was found on page 5. Well, it's actually, I think, throughout, but right here on page 5, lines 19 through 22, it kind of specifically lays it out. And I think it's, you know, it would probably be unacceptable for us to be placing personal liability on these officers. And so with that, Mr. Chair, I move L007 and ask that it be displayed.
Thank you. The amendment has been properly moved and now displayed to Amendment L007. Representative Williams.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So what this would do is it would remove the personal liability aspect that we think exists within the bill right now, and it would basically shift that liability to the law enforcement agency or the agency itself, rather than being on the individual officer who might be engaged in a civil arrest in violation of this bill. I think this is certainly a measured approach, and I don't see why there should be any serious opposition to this, and I would simply ask for a yes vote.
Thank you, Representative Williams. Representative Herrick to Amendment L007.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So I asked for a no vote on this amendment. What we're saying here is that if someone violates the law, that there is some responsibility to that individual. We do want to make sure that there is accountability in this bill, and so I ask for a no vote on this amendment.
Any further discussion? Yes, Representative Soper to Amendment L007.
Well, thank you, Mr. Chair. And I'm speaking in favor of this amendment. I think it's really important that our law enforcement not be liable for something that they're actually doing within the scope of their job. And to not have this would basically be to say that something is actually a key function, and yet the state is going to say, well, if you're actually doing your job, you potentially can be sued civilly and lose the entire family farm. And that's just not right. So I ask for a yes vote.
Thank you. Representative Liston to Amendment L007.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Members, I rise in support of L007. So if I understand this right, a law enforcement officer who, by the way, might be post-certified, but anyways, just happens to be probably. But anyways, a law enforcement officer who is only doing his duty and sees somebody who has actually broken the law and decides to arrest that person who has actually broken the law, then he or she will be in violation, and they could be subject to arrest, and the person who actually broke the law would not be subject to arrest. Members, are we living in an alternative universe? I've told my constituents time and time again that things really are upside down here, and I think if this amendment fails, it will prove that we indeed live in an alternative universe. The person who is not, the law enforcement officer who has not broken the law and is only trying to enforce the law against somebody who has broken the law will now be subject to a fine or actually potentially imprisonment. So I would ask, I think this is an excellent amendment, I would ask for an aye vote on L007. Thank you.
Thank you, Representative Liston. Representative Benavides? No? Representative Williams? Thank you, Representative Benavides. Representative Williams.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Members, this amendment I like to see it as a pro-law enforcement amendment. These are guys that are just doing their job, and there's differing opinions on what's actually a violation of the law and what's not. Certainly the bill proponents would say that if they're violating this bill, should it become law, then yeah, they should be subject to some sort of penalty. But I don't view it that way, because right now, there's laws on the books that would dictate that this needs to be enforced, that we want to be able to ensure that our immigration policies are upheld. And that's certainly not a violation of the law. So I would dispute that anyone who's engaging in this behavior from the get-go is somehow violating the law. And I just want to make sure that we're protecting the good men and women of law enforcement from any sort of personal liability, especially since there is a dispute on what's lawful and what's not. And we certainly see that as it's being litigated in the courts. Let's go ahead and do them a favor and make sure that they're not personally on the hook for something that probably isn't against the law, but rather let's let their law enforcement agencies be able to protect them from any undue harm as they perform their duties. I think that's only reasonable, and to oppose it, I think, would be fundamentally anti-law enforcement. So please support this pro-law enforcement amendment.
Thank you, Representative Williams. Any further discussion? Representative Benavides.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And members, I have the utmost respect for law enforcement. They have an extremely difficult job, whether it's state, local, or federal law enforcement. But one of the things that federal law enforcement has to take an oath about, just like the rest of us, is to enforce the law. If this bill passed, they would have to enforce the law. This liability would only occur if they ignore the law and they break the law, and they should. It is not within their scope of duty to break the law. That's what this is about. It does not stop them from picking somebody up somewhere else. Again, this bill is about our authority as a state to maintain well-functioning courts. And most law enforcement would not have any problem with upholding the law if this bill were to pass. And we do this all the time, that most people that work for the government are indemnified by the government unless they're acting outside the scope. And a law enforcement officer who breaks the law is acting outside the scope and should be liable. And I would urge a no vote on this amendment.
Thank you, Representative Benavides. Representative Williams to Amendment L007.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I still renew my call for a yes vote on this. I want to give an example. If my county sheriff were to assist immigration authorities in a detainer request, and they knew that an illegal person who was here illegally was near the surrounding areas or in a courthouse in my county, this law would prohibit him from assisting. But if he wants to assist, he should be able to assist, because as the federal law is concerned, it's appropriate for local law enforcement to cooperate with federal immigration authorities. I think this is absurd, right? And I think it gets to my earlier point that there's competing views on what's lawful and what's not lawful, and that's obviously being adjudicated in the court system right now. So I would say that, if my sheriff wants to be able to assist federal immigration authorities because he views it to be lawful under federal law, then why are we trying to place personal liability on him or any of his officers to assist in those civil arrests? I think it's absolutely crazy that we're gonna punish law enforcement for helping to enforce our immigration policies. So I would ask for a yes vote on this. Again, it's pro law enforcement. It's the right thing to do, and we shouldn't punish, cops that want to help make sure our streets are safe. Thank you.
Thank you, Representative Williams. Representative Harry.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Members, I'm not sure if folks remember how government works, but law enforcement is supposed to enforce the laws that we put in place. And perhaps we need to have a conversation about House Bill 1124 that we passed last year that was clear on what law enforcement can and cannot do when it comes to assisting ICE in their jobs. And so what we're saying here today is that courthouse arrests will no longer be allowed in Colorado. That is not up for debate by law enforcement. It will be the law that we have put in place. If there is someone who has issues with that, they don't just get to not enforce the law, they go through the court system. So this argument of liability or immunity, and by the way, this immunity language goes way beyond the immunity we give law enforcement currently. Way beyond. So if we want to talk about giving immunity for someone not doing their job, for someone going against the law that we have put in place, that's absurd. We put laws in place for a reason, and law enforcement is here to enforce the law. If you don't like the bill, vote against it. But you can't give law enforcement immunity from enforcing the laws that we put in place. I ask for a no vote on this amendment.
Thank you, Representative Harris. Representative Hotorf.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, esteemed colleagues. So here we are in the great state of Colorado, trying to pass a law that's going to make a law enforcement officer a criminal if he or she attempts to do her job. Wow. Now, this amendment actually protects our hardworking law enforcement officers trying to do and promulgate the laws that they are, depending on the law enforcement agency they are assigned to allow them to do their jobs without retribution. Now, yes, the representative here speaks and says, well, this is the law, we're going to have the law, and we're going to follow the law. Well, it's only a law if we make it a law. Should we make it a law? Well, there's people in this chamber that think not. There's others that think so. But this amendment actually helps law enforcement officers, and our men and women in blue, do not get enough help. We continue to slap them around and tell them how they do things and how they shouldn't do things and how bad they are and how criminal they are. Well, I will tell you, ladies and gentlemen, there might be a few bad apples in every barrel, but for the large percentage of our law enforcement, our men in blue, they're working hard to try to do the jobs that they need to do to protect our citizens at every level. And I get tired of watching people beat up law enforcement. If there's bad apples, let's get them out of the barrel and let the law deal with them appropriately. With this particular amendment, I would argue that this is helping and protecting and doing what we call top cover.
Representative Hotorf, please do not impugn the motives of other people, sir. Stay to the amendment.
Yes, Mr. Chairman, I will stick to the amendment. This particular amendment protects our law enforcement. It gives them what we call top cover. Does anybody get top cover when they're trying to do their jobs? Well, maybe not in this chamber if we don't pass amendments to give our law enforcement top cover to protect them from further liability. I have a brother in law enforcement. You know how hard it is for him to do his job? And we're making it harder every day in this state. And we will continue to make it harder if we don't consider these amendments for whatever motives we might have. I think about my brother every day and what he does. And if he'll live to see the next week in the state of Colorado in his duties. And we continue to hamstring our law enforcement, and we don't even want to have the consideration for one small adjustment to this bill to provide some top cover. And that is very frustrating to watch, ladies and gentlemen. If you have family members in law enforcement, it is very difficult to watch this body not allow one consideration for some top cover for the jobs and duties they do at any level of law enforcement. I strongly support anything that we will do, anything, one small ounce of measure that we will do to help law enforcement do their jobs. Quit discounting that need. Quit kicking that aside like it's nothing and all our law enforcement are bad. Ladies and gentlemen, I am very frustrated with this chamber right now without not one consideration, not an ounce of consideration for law enforcement and giving them any kind of top cover. Any. It's not right. It's not right for the state. It's not right for all the levels of law enforcement. Please change the way you think and give some small consideration for that particular, in this particular amendment. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Representative Hotorf. Any further discussion on Amendment L007? Seeing none, the question before us is the adoption of Amendment L007. All those in favor say aye. Aye. All opposed say no. No. Amendment L007 is lost. We are back to the bill. Any further discussion? Yes. Representative Buck.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And I just have a quick question for the bill sponsors. Do you have any law enforcement, district attorney, any organizations like that that supports this bill?
Thank you, Representative Buck. Representative Harrod.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. No law enforcement testified against the bill.
Thank you, Representative Harrod. Representative Buck.
Well, I have to tell you, I think that word humility comes back into this argument about, we are not district attorneys. We don't have to be in the police enforcement business. So I just scratch my head why legislators think they need to tell law enforcement how to do their business. So I ask for a no on this vote, a no on this bill. Thank you.
Thank you, Representative Buck. Any further discussion? Yes, Representative Geithner. And we're back to the bill, sir.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. Members, kind of on that same line, we talk about law enforcement who are on duty, specifically in the bill, page 5, lines 9 through 14, and I'll read it for you here. It says, an on-duty law enforcement officer who is not employed by or contracted with courthouse security or participating in a court proceeding shall present credentials and state the purpose of the officer's presence to any existing courthouse security who shall maintain a record of the information. Members, that type of questioning as to why that law enforcement officer is there seems almost that we're holding that law enforcement with some level of suspicion. Why are they there? What are they up to? That they should be stopped, interrogated, questioned. And members, that causes me concern because I don't think that our law enforcement officers should be treated as criminals. And so in light of that, I offer L002 and ask that it be displayed.
Thank you. Amendment L002 has been properly moved and is now displayed. Representative Geithner, Amendment L002.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And so, members, what this does, it simply strikes that section of the bill. It would simply strike lines 4 through 14, lines 9 through 14 of page 5, and it would take away that element that looks like we're trying to interrogate our law enforcement officers, question why they're there, what are their motives, what are they there for? I think that the answer is clear, that they're there to serve and protect. And so I would ask you to support this amendment. Let's stand with our law enforcement. Let's remove this section of the bill, which I absolutely fundamentally disagree with. And I would urge a yes on L002.
Further discussion on Amendment L002. Representative Harrod.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And another surgical amendment from my colleague. I ask for a no vote on this amendment.
Further discussion on Amendment L002. Representative Williams.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I rise in support of this amendment, and I can't stress enough how we need to be a little bit more understanding about law enforcement here, because this, I think, is the intent of the amendment from Representative Geithner, is to ensure that we're not treating law enforcement with a suspicious eye. We're not questioning, what they're doing here. because we ultimately assume that their job is to protect and serve us. And I think it speaks to the larger perception out there that I think the law enforcement community has, especially with the past couple of years, that there's a war on law enforcement. And I think what this would do is it would allow this body to affirmatively declare, you know what, we appreciate law enforcement, we don't want to have a war against you, we don't want to treat you as some sort of suspicious, criminal or like a criminal. And I think this is appropriate, right? Police officers, cops on the beat, they're there to help make sure that we're safe, right? And that the law is enforced. And so I don't know why we would have some sort of antagonistic language stay in this bill, because that's how I view it. I mean, we'll see it here, right? An on-duty law enforcement officer who is not employed by or contracted with the courthouse security or participating in a court proceeding shall present credentials and state the purpose of the officer's presence to any existing courthouse security who shall maintain a record of that information. Ladies and gentlemen, that's antagonistic, at least in my mind, on its face. And I think it sends the wrong message to the law enforcement community. We should be partners with them. We should work with them in every opportunity we have. We should work with them and ensure that we're helping them to do their job. And to put something like this in here, I think makes their job ultimately harder, and it further breeds mistrust between the community and law enforcement. They're just trying to do their job. You know, if they have to go there, they have to go there. And I think we don't need to subject them to these unnecessary, security checkpoint procedures. So I would ask for a yes vote on this, and I do thank Representative Geithner for offering this amendment, because again, I think we want to get away from the perception that there's a war on law enforcement, and this would help do that. So thank you, and I ask for a yes vote.
Thank you, Representative Williams. Representative Hare.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Members, it's a bit disingenuous to say this bill is a war on law enforcement. Law enforcement did not testify against this bill. There is no anti-law enforcement language in this bill. I am very pro-law enforcement, and I want to thank law enforcement for all that they've done for our communities, especially our state troopers who have literally saved my life when I was in this building. But showing your credentials is not something that is anti-law enforcement. It's something that law enforcement knows what to do. It's very important that we do have order in a courtroom, and that includes when people come in and out to show their credentials. We're talking about federal law enforcement officers here, not our local beat cops. So I ask for a no vote on this amendment, and I would ask that we not impugn motives of myself as a bill sponsor and folks who vote on this bill. We are not anti-law enforcement. We very much support law enforcement. This bill was not opposed by law enforcement. I ask for a no vote on this amendment and a yes vote on the bill.
Thank you, Representative Hare. Representative Benavides.
Thank you, Mr. Chairs. And members, I also rise in opposition to the amendment. You know, I probably have some unique experience that many of you may not have. I was the executive director of the Department of General Services that was responsible for contracted security personnel for the courts in Denver. And those are not law enforcement in most of the courts, particularly in the larger courts that do security. And when you have people coming in with weapons, if this section of the bill follows the section right before that permits the arrests of criminal arrests. So if somebody is coming from another jurisdiction and they're coming there to enforce a criminal arrest warrant, then it's important that the courthouse security know what they're there for. Because again, most courthouse security are private security personnel. They are not law enforcement. They want to be apprised of if something's going to go down, and they need to ask for other law enforcement to be there, because oftentimes when that happens, things can blow up. There can be problems with that. So this is a protection for the people in the courthouse, which is what this bill is about. It's to maintain a well-running courthouse, court system, and it's also to protect the dignity of that courthouse. So this is not a burden on law enforcement to just say, I'm here to effect an arrest a criminal arrest or I'm here for some other reason. Maybe they're just there for moral support of someone. Who knows what their reason is. But they are taking a weapon into that building. And I don't think it's burdensome to ask them to tell the court security what they're doing. That's all this section does. It is not something that law enforcement is not used to. They do that when they go into other facilities. They're aware of that. So I think the bill as draft is a good bill, and I urge opposition to this amendment.
Thank you, Representative Benavides. Representative Hotorf to Amendment L002.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I believe if a law enforcement officer goes into a court off duty, he is a citizen. But because of his law enforcement status and his duty, oftentimes he has to carry a firearm. I have my brother who works in law enforcement, and I will use him as an example. There are many times when he's doing things off duty where he still has to carry his sidearm because of the job that he does. But you know what? He wants to be a citizen. He just wants to be a citizen and participate as a regular citizen. He doesn't want to have to announce that he's a law enforcement officer because he's off duty. Boy, give him a break. Give our law enforcement officers a break when they're off duty. This amendment would allow that, but without any consideration, even though they are required to carry a sidearm when they're off duty to protect themselves from many threats that they have in conducting their duty. Because make no mistake about it, many law enforcement officers, based on what they do to thwart criminal activity, have threats against their lives. There are gang members that have threatened them, or organizations, illegal organizations that have threatened them, and they have to protect themselves against that. So we continue to not give consideration for the good men in blue who, while off duty, maybe just want to be off duty. Even in the courthouse, I would ask the bill sponsors what this would hurt. What would this amendment hurt? How many times have we had this situation where we've had a court situation, and I ask the question to the bill sponsors today, how many times, and give me specific examples where we have had this situation where the court system and the court in this specific case was harmed, was jeopardized, or violence was caused by an off-duty law enforcement officer who, according to the discussions here, maybe that law enforcement officer doesn't have the professional judicialness to handle his firearm in a way, even in a court. But I would argue that they do. They're well trained and they do, and they understand their lines of responsibility. They understand their jurisdictional responsibilities, and 99% of the time they are professional and they are very respectful of any other judicial district, or in this case the court, who has the responsibility of maintaining that court. So please give me some specific examples why, some very specific examples why we can't have an amendment like this to give some consideration, or any amendment for that matter, to give some consideration for our law enforcement.
Thank you, Representative Hotorf. Representative Herrick.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And while I appreciate the sake of debating for debate, I want to speak specifically to this amendment. This amendment specifically speaks only to on-duty law enforcement. My colleague from the other side of the aisle might want to reference the bill, exactly the statute that this amendment is striking. Page 5, line 9, section 4. It starts with on-duty law enforcement officers. I ask for a no vote on this amendment.
Thank you, Representative Herrick. Representative Will to Amendment L002.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. It's an honor to serve with you. I have a question.
Honor to serve with you, sir.
I have a question for the bill sponsors. How does this, first I stand in the support of this amendment, and here's why, but how does this apply to undercover officers? So if they're in covert operations, many times you see covert officers are in court, sometimes embedded with some of these communities and some of the people and clientele that are in the courthouse, and maybe going with them to court. how does this apply to those undercover officers? Because they don't want to break the law. They are on duty. They come into the courthouse. They cannot reveal who they are and why they're there. And so that's one of the reasons I support this amendment. Thank you.
Thank you, Representative Will. Representative Herrick.
Thank you, and thank you, Representative Will, for your question. So, in a courthouse, in order to enter, you go through a magnetometer. Undercover officers also have to go through that, and they have to, in order to get around that, they would be declaring that they have to declare that they have a weapon, right? So, if they're undercover, it would be the same practice that they're currently undergoing now. That's my understanding of how the bill would work. So, again, I ask for a no vote on this amendment.
Thank you, Representative Herrick. Representative Will.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And yeah, that isn't the case. If they're actually truly undercover and working a particular case, they do not reveal. Other law enforcement in the building do not know who they are, and they're truly embedded in secrecy because they have to for their own safety. So in that respect, they would not declare that. No.
Representative Herrick for a rebuttal.
Oh, thank you, Mr. Chair. So then how do they get into the courthouse? How do they get through the magnetometers?
Representative Will for a rebuttal.
Thank you. So they may or may not be carrying a weapon. So they can get in the same as anyone else can get into the courthouse. And chances are a lot of the UC officers that are embedded in that in a courthouse situation would not be carrying. So that would bring a lot of suspicion to maybe the people that they're looking at if they were carrying all the time. So these people that are truly undercover and working these operations, they blend right in with the people that they're investigating. So chances are they wouldn't be going through with a firearm or having to check through in that manner.
Representative Geithner, would you like to speak again to your amendment? L002.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And so, members, I just renew the sentiment for my plea in asking you to support this. I think we heard an excellent argument by Representative Will, and that is true, that all of our undercover law enforcement officers do not carry. And so if the way that you would identify someone that is undercover is just solely because they carry a sidearm, I think that would kind of defeat the purpose of them being undercover. So I think that this does offer an area where there is definitely some lack of clarity. I think striking this section would absolutely take care of that. It would not put any of our undercover law enforcement at risk. It also wouldn't hold them in a state of where we're looking at them with some sort of suspicion, some level of, question. Why are you here? What are you doing? What are your motives? Why even show up today? And so I would ask that we support this amendment. Let's go ahead and protect law enforcement. Let's protect our undercover law enforcement. They have a job to do. We've asked them to do that, and that is to serve and protect. And so I think that by striking this section, supporting this amendment, I think we will say that we are prepared to do that here as members of this body. So I renew my ask for a yes on this amendment. Thank you.
Thank you, Representative Geithner. Representative Soper to Amendment L002.
Well, thank you, Mr. Chair. I also rise in support of this amendment, and I want to thank my good colleague from Garfield County for bringing it. If we look at lines 12 through 14, which are included in what the amendment is striking out, it talks about shall maintain a record of the information. And just to add on to this argument that we're talking about, as far as undercover law enforcement personnel or personnel who's members of law enforcement who happen to not be carrying any firearms with them, because there's nothing in this section, by the way, that talks about firearms. It just talks about on-duty law enforcement. And that maintaining a record of this information of who's actually an on-duty member of law enforcement entering the courthouse means that if you are an undercover officer, or at least an officer in street clothes, all of a sudden your name is being put onto this record, and it's a record that definitely could reveal your identity, because certainly other people observing that your name is being put on a list. And anytime names go on lists, I think that we should have a cause for pause. So that's just something that really concerns me about this, and which is why I'm going to be supporting this amendment. Thank you.
Thank you, Representative Soper. Representative Liston to Amendment L002.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Members, I come down in support of L002. A very close member of my family who will remain anonymous for good reasons. They worked in Vice Narcotics and Intelligence, VNI as it's commonly called, and they worked, I can say, very closely with undercover officers who were post-certified, by the way. I always like to put that in. Anyways, many times these undercover officers, they were not carrying firearms because the kinds of people that they were associating with, when you're around people and they're carrying a firearm, some people are flashing around. It kind of gives you a lot of times to be ill at ease. So they can blend in better when they're not carrying a firearm. They can dress the part, they can look the part and act the part, but they're just not carrying a firearm. So I think Representative Will's amendment is well-crafted and well-meaning, and just remember that not all undercover people are carrying a weapon, but they're still doing their duty. In fact, the fact that they're not carrying a weapon, they're exposing themselves to even greater potential harm and danger to protect the public because they don't want to be identified carrying a weapon. So whosever amendment this is, Representative Geithner's, I misspoke, Representative Geithner's amendment, sorry, I know Representative Will came down because he is post-certified and he does understand this very well, where Representative Geithner, I don't believe, he is not post-certified. So I highly respect the opinion of Representative Will, who is post-certified and has been for many years. He understands this. And I see a couple other members. So members, this is a well-crafted amendment by Representative Geithner. So I urge an aye vote on L002.
Thank you, Representative Liston. Representative Geithner.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And so, members, I think it begs the next question. That is, so it asks. Hold on. Let me read this directly. State the purpose in the presence of any existing courthouse security. Who shall maintain a record of the information? So we know that a record will be maintained of who these law enforcement officers are that are on duty. We don't know if they'll necessarily be on undercover or not. And so then is that record, is that quorable? Because at that point, are we going to expose for the broader public who our undercover law enforcement officers are? I think that actually adds another level of concern that necessarily wasn't there before. I think the easiest solution is, of course, to go ahead and strike this section. Let's not expose our undercover law enforcement officers, their families, their names. Let's not make these things subject to quora. Let's not, further hold in the broader view all of our law enforcement as suspicious or under some level of suspicion. And so, members, I renew my plea. Let's go ahead and take care of the ambiguity that's here. Let's strike this section, not put our undercover law enforcement officers in a place where they don't want to violate the law and then feel like they need to disclose who they are and why they're there, and then furthermore make that record quorable and further exposed to the broader folks who our undercover law enforcement officers are, who we have actually asked to serve and protect us. So, members, again, I ask for a yes on this amendment.
Thank you, Representative Geithner. Representative Hotorf to Amendment L002.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Esteemed colleagues, I will talk specifically to on-duty law enforcement officers. So if you're working undercover, based on disregarding this amendment or not giving it any consideration, now you're going to force law-abiding law enforcement to break the law if they're undercover because they don't want someone to see them sign up on a roster that everybody in that building, and make no mistake about it, criminal elements are smart and they're going to be watching and they will know. Approach this place, have to sign their name to something, and then reveal potentially that they're a law enforcement officer. So now what's going to happen, because we don't want the consideration for top cover, against our hardworking law enforcement officers? Let me say that again. Do we give our law enforcement officers any top cover? It appears to me we're acting as if they're going to be the criminal in the court. But getting back to the amendment, now that particular undercover agent is going to have to break the law because of the law you want to pass, that the sponsors want to pass here and not amend. Now we're going to ask them to break the law to keep their undercover status and not put themselves at risk. Because let me tell you, these undercover officers are working around the worst of the worst. And if you think for 1 second when the worst of the worst determines that you're law enforcement, they're going to have any consideration in regard for your life, I will tell you they will get zero. They will probably be murdered, killed in the line of duty, because now we have given them no consideration. And we continue to refute and refuse amendments. Let the state of Colorado witness. We continue to refute and refuse amendments that will give law enforcement top cover. They're not the criminals. Let me say that again, state of Colorado. Let me say that again to my colleagues. The majority of law enforcement are not criminals. Why do we continue to look at them as potential criminals and not give them top cover? I do not understand this. Please help me understand.
Thank you, Representative Holtorf. Representative Soper to Amendment L002.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just one other issue that this amendment addresses, and that's our rural courthouses that are actually multi-purpose buildings, especially where the security has actually been placed, certainly not right at the courthouse door, but to include before you get to some of the administrative offices, such as the clerk or the treasurer. So in that instance, if a on-duty law enforcement officer who's actually entering the courthouse building, which is really an administrative building, they would be passing through security at that point. And let's say they're going to the treasurer's office and not to the court, or to the assessor's office, or to the clerk's office. I mean, there's lots of reasons why they would be doing so. I mean, let's say they need to renew their license plate tags or something like that. Then you actually have created a situation here where it's not just the court, but actually you're affecting the business of the entire administrative building, which means that you're really complicating things as far as the building is concerned. And in a small town where you have people running in and out of your courthouse administrative building every single day, that can cause administrative delays. It can cost a lot of money to those really small counties and small cities. And it just doesn't make sense at all. It's a undue burden on the building and the operations of the building as well. So I once again would ask for a yes vote on this amendment.
Thank you, Representative Soper. Any further discussion on Amendment L002? Seeing none, the question before us is the adoption of Amendment L002. All those in favor say aye. Aye. All opposed say no. No. Amendment L002 is lost. We are back to the bill. Representative Williams.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And members, obviously I still oppose the bill itself, but I still think there could be some room for improvement on it. So with that, I move L009 and ask it be displayed.
Amendment L009 has been properly moved and is now displayed to Amendment L009. Representative Williams.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So what this amendment would do is it would essentially ensure that this policy wouldn't be considered by the federal government as a sanctuary jurisdiction type policy. And I think that's something that we really need to hone in on here. You know, there was, I believe it was about a week and a half ago, or maybe just a week ago, where the Second Circuit ruled that the Trump administration could withhold funds from what they considered to be sanctuary states, jurisdictions, cities, and what have you. And granted, we're in the 10th Circuit. I certainly grant you that. However, this adds more more ammunition to the federal government in their justification for cracking down on these jurisdictions. And I guarantee you that with this policy and some of the other policies that have been passed, this is a very real threat. And if we pass this bill without this amendment, then we are opening ourselves up to that type of enforcement measure from the federal government, because they do in fact have supremacy as it relates to immigration. And I don't think we want to subject our state or our localities to not being able to avail themselves to taxpayer-funded grants that could go towards any of our needs here and our priorities here. And I know that that's a very real possibility, especially as we approach budget week. You know, we do account for those federal dollars in some of our line items. And so I would ask that we consider that as we debate on this amendment and the underlying bill itself. But I also want to point out another issue of why we need this in here right now. This was, I believe, published last year, April 25th, and you can go ahead and Google it yourself. But a Massachusetts judge who had helped a person here who was unlawfully escape ICE arrest in a courthouse was arrested by federal authorities. And so essentially, without this amendment, this bill would codify a practice that would open up courthouses, their employees, judges potentially to prosecution from the federal government. And I think that's something we should certainly consider and not take lightly, because we don't want to be putting anything in our state law that would open up any of our public servants to some sort of federal prosecution, which is a very real threat. And I think we could all agree that the Trump administration is very serious about enforcing immigration policy as they see it. And we really need to be careful if we're going to be engaging in this type of activity that I don't think we really have any business, at least making harder. What this amendment would do, though, is it would ensure that this policy is not a sanctuary city, sanctuary jurisdiction type policy. And I think that's absolutely appropriate. We should not be helping anyone here who's unlawfully present in our United States, and we should be taking every opportunity to cooperate with federal immigration authorities, which is why I think this amendment, which would ensure that it would not apply, the bill itself would not apply to these people, is absolutely necessary. So I'd ask for a yes vote on this, and ask that we fully uphold and respect the laws of the land, whether they be state or federal. Thank you.
Thank you, Representative Williams. Representative Herrick.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So this amendment basically, I think, pretty much gets the bill. But I want to just say that the purpose of this bill is to allow anyone and everyone access to the courts for justice. This is not talking about the criminal process. This is only the civil process. And folks should feel safe in our courthouses. So I ask for a no vote on this amendment and a yes vote on the bill.
Further discussion? Yes, Representative Williams.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And I don't think anyone here generally disputes, at least on this side of the aisle, that we want to ensure that our courthouses are a safe place for everyone, generally speaking, to participate in and be a part of. But ultimately, I think, you heard it from the bill sponsor, right? This amendment would gut the purpose of the bill. And that's my big issue with this bill, is that it is, an attempt to undermine lawful immigration enforcement, which is why I think it's necessary to put this amendment into the bill, because we shouldn't be doing that. We've had discussions, great discussions, not only in this chamber, but also in the Senate and the governor, about how we want to ensure that we're respecting the rule of law here. But then we see bills like this that potentially conflict with it, and that's why I offered this amendment. When an individual is here illegally, when they're disregarding our laws, and then we make it harder for law enforcement to actually cooperate with our federal authorities to make sure that we're maintaining public safety and upholding the rule of law, that creates a dangerous situation for Colorado. And it's something that we shouldn't be a part of. And it's been stated in the past that there's no intention to create Colorado as a sanctuary state. However, the actions are not congruent with those intentions or those statements. And that's why I bring this amendment here. There's absolutely no reason why we should be doing whatever we can to undermine lawful immigration enforcement. That's not our role. It should never be our role. In fact, all we should be doing is ensuring that they have the ability, they being immigration enforcement, they have the ability to properly execute the laws and that we don't get in their way. And if at possible, resources provided, that we help them execute those laws. This makes absolute sense. And I think the other thing I would mention is that by not having this amendment in the bill, it sends a signal. It sends a signal to anyone that wants to violate our immigration laws that they can come to Colorado. That they can come to Colorado and they can ignore the rule of law and be here in violation of it and potentially engage in other sorts of illicit or illegal activities. I mean, if we don't respect the laws, in some cases, then that just encourages others to not respect the law in all cases, right? And I think that's the danger here, is the potential for the importation of crime, absent this amendment. And that's what I want to avoid. I want to ensure that the citizens of Colorado are well protected, and the only way we can do that is by ensuring that all of our laws, whether they be state or federal, are upheld. And the last thing we want to do is send a signal to people who enter our country illegally, or worse, people who not only enter illegally but have ill intent, who actually want to commit crimes, to come here because it's a safe place for them. And that's why I offer this amendment, and I ask for a yes vote, because quite frankly, it's a public safety issue, and we don't want to endanger our public, we don't want to endanger our law enforcement, and the best thing we can do is ensure that we're doing everything we can to prevent further acts of violence or crime that we don't need to be dealing with from people who come here illegally. So please vote yes on this amendment.
Thank you, Representative Williams. Representative Hotorf to Amendment L009.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, esteemed colleagues. Your community is put at risk when ICE detainers are ignored. This particular amendment speaks directly to this. And I want to speak on behalf of law enforcement and give them representation and give them top cover. In this particular amendment, I cannot overemphasize the request for law enforcement to get that top cover from its legislators and from the state capitol. U.S. Immigration and Customs Enforcement relies on exchange of information with its law enforcement agency partners to access foreign-born inmates at local, state, and federal facilities, and they use detainers as part of its public safety mission. There are many instances, and I do not need to name them, of foreign-born people in this country who have committed crimes, in some cases heinous crimes, against the citizens of the United States. That's really not the point of this, but we know that it has happened and will continue to happen. And our citizens need protected, and our law enforcement at every level has that responsibility. And United States citizens deserve that right of protection. Colorado citizens deserve that right of protection. I will continue. In many cases, these individuals pose a demonstrable threat to our communities. By passing this legislation and by not considering any amendments brought forth, we continue to allow for and passively condone that threat, or actively condone that threat here today. That will be a decision for those that are listening. By lodging detainers against these individuals, ICE makes every effort to ensure that removable aliens are turned over to proper custody at the conclusion of their criminal detention rather than being released into our communities, where many abscond and reoffend. Because these particular criminals have no respect for any law, especially the laws of the United States. For example, we know that one group of criminal aliens that ICE has researched has a recidivism rate of 46%. It is to the amendment. You want me to read the amendment? I'll tie it together.
Please stay to the amendment, sir. Thank you.
Do not apply. Let me read the whole thing, Mr. Chairman, please, just so I'm clear. Notwithstanding any provision of this Part 4 to the contrary, the provisions of this Part 4 do not apply to an individual who is unlawfully present in the United States. And I believe what I am speaking to are criminal aliens who are unlawfully present in the United States. Now, I am a country boy, and maybe I don't understand, but I think that's what I'm speaking to, because that's what criminal aliens are. Now, oftentimes, these criminal aliens may attend and participate in court activities. They may be present. If we pass this amendment, then they do not get this protection based on this bill. They're not given the protections that U.S. citizens are entitled to. But if these criminal aliens are attending a civil court and participating in our court process...
Representative Hotorf, please do not refer to people as illegal aliens. You can refer to them as immigrants or non-citizens, just like you refer to them as...
Mr. Chairman, the word I said was criminal aliens, and I will repeat the word criminal aliens. If you want to gavel me down on criminal aliens, then I will... Okay. At the respect of Mr. Chairman, I will change my description. Because I do respect my colleagues and I do respect this House. Okay, now, I would ask for the conversation to my left to please be taken a little farther away, as I have a hard time concentrating, Mr. Chairman, on what I'm trying to say. If you could please assist me in that regard, I would appreciate the consideration.
Just
Thank you.
speak to the amendment, sir. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I will speak to the amendment and what this amendment speaks to: unlawful, or rather individuals who are unlawfully present in the United States. In many cases, state or local laws or ordinances, policies are restricting or prohibiting the cooperation with ICE. This right here, this amendment would allow for those people to not get the protections under the bill. So I believe in this case, state or local ordinances or policies would not affect ICE activities. The results of these things in this cooperation can contribute to aliens being able to move freely around the country or in our court systems. If there is a potential for them to reoffend or harm members of the public, I would say that this amendment here allows for them not to be given the protections that this bill is trying to impose in our civil court systems. I don't believe they are entitled to those protections. I'm in support of this amendment to make sure they do not have the protections that are supposed to be given to the citizens of the United States, who laws in this country are to protect first and foremost. This is just a small example of why I support this amendment and still stand opposed to the bill. Thank you, Mr. Chairman, for your leadership, your guidance, and your consideration.
Thank you, Representative Hotorf. Any further discussion on Amendment L009? Representative Geithner.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And members, something else that we may want to consider is we heard reference to the ruling out of the Second Circuit and how federal funding could be withheld. I think it's important that we consider that, federal funding being withheld could actually have an impact on Space Force coming to Colorado as well. And so I think oftentimes as policymakers, we look at just the implications of the bill, but we sometimes miss what actually the second and third and fourth effects could be. And while that may seem a little out there, denial of federal fundings could actually impede the ability for Space Force to come to Colorado. And so I stand in support of this amendment. I think this gets to the heart of what we're trying to do here in terms of identifying some of the problems that we have with this bill. And so I too support the amendment, and I ask us that we consider those second, third, and fourth term effects that we sometimes can very easily overlook. So members, please vote yes on this amendment.
Thank you, Representative Geithner. Any further discussion on Amendment L009? Seeing none, the question before us is adoption of Amendment L009. All those in favor say aye. Aye. All opposed say no. No. Amendment L009 is lost. Back to the bill. Further discussion. Representative Geithner.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And Mr. Chair, I move L005 and ask that it be displayed.
Amendment L005 has been properly moved and is now displayed to the amendment.
And members, we've heard many concerns with this bill, and I think this is probably the best thing that we can do at this point. If we look at the risk to our undercover law enforcement, if we look at concerns that we have around their ability to go ahead and exercise what we've asked them to do, we look at the idea that this could be very easily viewed as a sanctuary courthouse bill. We look at the implications in and around the impacts of us being able to conduct ourselves with sovereignty when it comes to illegal aliens that may be here. I think that it is important that we consider all these factors. And so this one, while it may not be surgical, it is more of a shotgun blast. But I do think it is an opportunity that we should take, and maybe there's an opportunity where this policy such as this could be reworked. And so, members, I would urge us to adopt this amendment. Let's go ahead and strike the enacting clause. Like I said, not quite surgical, but I think a yes vote would be appreciated. Thank you, members.
Thank you, Representative Geithner. To Amendment L005, Representative Herod.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And yeah, this amendment is less surgical and artful, but more effective. So I do appreciate that, and direct, like myself, I think. Though I like my likeness in this amendment, I'm going to ask for a no vote on this. This would just get rid of the bill and make it not enacting. It strikes the enacting clause. So I ask for a no vote. And again, I thank my colleague for the respectful dialogue.
Thank you, Representative Herod. Representative Williams.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Well, members, I rise in support of this amendment, obviously, because I oppose the bill. And I won't do too much of a rehashing over everything that we've discussed, but at the heart of this bill, this is what I would consider a sanctuary jurisdiction type bill, where we are providing aid and cover to those who are unlawfully present in the United States. And this is something that we really don't have the authority to do, let alone should do. And I think that's been pretty well discussed, that the federal government has supremacy on this particular issue, and that we can't actively, nor should we actively try to stop them from being able to do their job. And this goes a step further, I want to say. In the past, when we've had this discussion, it's always been the federal government has its role and the state government has its role, and that we shouldn't interfere or help engage in federal immigration enforcement. That's sort of been the argument from the other side. This takes it a step further, though. This isn't just mere non-cooperation. This is now actively getting in the way of law enforcement at the federal level with immigration enforcement. It's getting in their way from actually being able to do their job. That's a step further than what has been previously discussed on this topic, not only on this floor, but also on the first floor with the governor's office. And that's why I think this bill is even more problematic than what we've seen in the past, which is why I support this amendment. Again, we should not be enacting this type of legislation because it ultimately does send a signal. It says, you know what, enter our country illegally and come to Colorado, it will be a safe haven for you. That's what this bill says as far as I could read it. And even it's interesting because it doesn't even mention the word illegal, doesn't mention the word immigrant, doesn't mention the word, words that you typically have associated with this topic of illegal immigration. But stated from the bill proponents and the sponsors themselves, that is actually the intent of this bill, is to protect those who have entered our country illegally and are currently unlawfully present. And just generally speaking, that really goes against, I think, what we're all about. We're all lawmakers here. We all want to pass laws. And presumably we want to pass them for the good of society. But here in this bill, what we're saying is, you know what, we're going to pass a law that encourages more law breaking. And not only that, we're also going to make it hard for law enforcement and their lives as they try to potentially cooperate with federal immigration authorities. This is, ladies and gentlemen, this is all backwards. Black is white, up is down, short is long. This is crazy. There's no other way to say it. This is crazy. And to further put a finer point on this, passing a bill like this opens us up not only to litigation, but also losing out on federal funds and potentially, as Representative Geithner had pointed out earlier, our ability to have a permanent home for the Space Force, right? If you're in the federal government right now and you're looking at the places where we could have benefits coming from the federal government, like the Space Force or tax dollars, and you see that we're, the state of Colorado is flaunting immigration law, why? I can't fathom why the Trump administration would want to reward us with those perks and benefits that we richly do deserve, absent this, obviously. They're going to look to other states that are actually working and cooperating and following federal immigration law. And so for those various reasons, I support this amendment because we should never, ever be passing bills like this because essentially what this bill does is it does allow, it does protect those who are committing illegal acts and it unnecessarily burdens law enforcement. And so I would ask for a yes vote on this so that this bill would never, ever be enacted. Thank you.
Thanks, Representative Williams. Further discussion on Amendment L005. Representative Melton.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Members, I ask for a no vote on this amendment. Really, this amendment mirrors the exact problem that the bill is trying to fix, and that's to make sure that our courthouses are places that people can seek justice safely, because right now they're not. And if we pass this amendment, then we're exacerbating the problem by saying that we're going to pass a bill that lets people have a false sense of hope when this amendment would strike the enacting clause and make it so the bill is virtually dead. And that's the exact problem that we're having in the courthouse, is that people want to go and seek justice. They want to be able to, if they're victims of a crime, make sure that, that person is held to justice. But they're afraid. They're afraid under the current situation because they're afraid that they may get arrested by, or through some civil action, some civil arrest. And so, members, I ask for a no vote on this amendment because this amendment mirrors exactly what we're trying to fix.
Thank you, Representative Melton. Further discussion on Amendment L005. Seeing none, question before us is adoption of Amendment L005. All those in favor say aye. Aye. All opposed say no. No. Amendment L05 is lost. We are back to the bill. Further discussion. Seeing none, the question before us is the adoption of Senate Bill 83. All those in favor say aye. Aye. All opposed say no. No. Amendment Senate Bill 083 is passed. Okay. Mr. Randall, please read title to House Bill 1061.
House Bill 1061, Representative Valdez A. and Harrod, also Senator Moreno, concerning pharmacists' ability to provide HIV infection prevention medications to patients in connection with making an appropriation.
Thank you. Representative Valdez, Representative Harrod. Who wants to go first? Representative Harrod.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I move House Bill 1061 and the Appropriations Committee report.
And there's also Public Health.
And the Public Health Committee report.
Okay. To the Appropriations report.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. The Appropriations Committee appropriated money. I ask for a yes vote.
Thank you. Any further discussion on the Appropriations Committee report to House Bill 1061? Seeing none, question before us is the adoption of the Appropriations Committee report. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed say no. Appropriations report is adopted. To the Public Health Care and Human Services report. Representative Valdez.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I move Amendment L006 and ask that it be displayed.
Okay. The amendment has been moved and is now displayed.
So this
to Amendment L006, Representative Alex Valdez.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So this amendment comes from our work with CMS and other folks just to ensure that we had a proper protocol process. It allows for the bill to go through all three protocol processes and sets a timeline to achieve that, and I would ask for a yes vote.
Thank you. Any further discussion on Amendment L003 to the Public Health and Care Human Services report? L006, I'm sorry. All those in favor? The question before us is the adoption of Amendment L006. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed say no.
Thank you.
The amendment is adopted. We are to the bill. Representative Alex Valdez.
We're not to the bill.
I'm sorry. We're back to the Public Health and Care Human Services report.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I move Amendment L008 and ask it be displayed.
The amendment has been properly moved and now displayed to Amendment L008. Representative Alex Valdez.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. So basically what this does is allows, this has some language for the health plans about in-network versus out-of-network, and it's as part of our stakeholding process, coming to agreement with them, so I'd ask for a yes vote.
Thank you. Any further discussion on Amendment L008? Seeing none, the question before us is the adoption of Amendment L008 to the Public Health and Care and Human Services report. All those in favor say aye.
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 All opposed say no. The amendment is adopted. Now we're back to Public Health and Care and Human Services report. Representative Harrod.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I ask for a yes vote on the committee report as amended.
Thank you. Any further discussion? Seeing none, the question before us is adoption of the Public Health and Care and Human Services report as amended. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed say no. The Public Health Care and Human Services report is adopted. Now we're to the bill. Assistant Minority Leader.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And members, I want to thank the sponsors for their work on the amendment, but also kind of maybe not thank them, because now this really puts me in a conundrum, because we have a bill that allows the pharmacist to prescribe this and actually gives easier access to this medication, which I really like that aspect. There is still they got rid of the step therapy. I had concerns about that. That's out of the bill. The only concern I have left is the mandated coverage, but the federal government's already doing that, and this goes into effect even after their timeline. So you guys have put me into a personal quarrel here of how I'm going to vote, but I do appreciate all your work on this, and I think it's gotten a lot of people much more to a yes. So thank you for your work on it. Thank
you, Minority Leader Representative Neville. Any further discussion? Yes, Representative Alex Valdez.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. This is still a great bill. We believe this is going to save lives and increase access to health care, and I would ask you for an aye vote. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Representative Herrick.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you, Mr. Minority Leader, for your help in making sure that this bill is complete before we go to votes on thirds on this bill. But members, I want to just say that I came to this bill in an interesting way. A lot of folks, but specifically I was talking to one of my interns, a young person who thinks that HIV is not an issue anymore. Folks, it's still here, but there is solutions, there is life-saving medication. This will make sure that people have access to that life-saving medication. So I ask for a yes vote on this bill. Thank you.
Thank you both. Any further discussion on House Bill 1061? Seeing none, the question before us is adoption of House Bill 1061. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed say no. House Bill 1061 is adopted. Mr. Majority Leader.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Great job today. I move the committee rise and report.
Seeing no objection, the committee will rise and report.
The House will come back to order. Mr. Randall, please read the report of the Committee of the Whole.
Madam Speaker, your committee holds begs leave to report has had no shares for apologize bills to assume release favor the recommendations there on House Bill 1061 as amended passing or rest please account for third and final passage and Bill 83 passing or revised please account for third and final passage.
Representative Exum. Representative Exum. You all have heard the motion. There are a few amendments at the desk. Mr. Randall, please read the Geithner amendment.
Representative Geithner moved to amend the report of the Committee on Diversity action taken by the committee and not adopting the following Geithner Amendment L002 to Senate Bill 83 to show sudden pass. The Senate Bill 83 is amended pass.
Representative Geithner.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Members, I move the Geithner Amendment to the Committee of the Whole and ask for a yes vote.
Is there any further discussion on the Geithner amendment? Seeing none, the question before us is the Geithner amendment to the report of the Committee of the Whole. Mr. Randall, please open the machine and members, please vote. Champion Holtorf. Representative Holtorf is excused. Please close the machine. With 29 aye votes, 35 no votes, and 1 excused, the amendment is lost. Please read the next Geithner amendment.
Representative Geithner moved to amend the report of the Committee on Diversity action taken by the committee and not adopting the following Geithner Amendment L004 to Senate Bill 83 show sudden pass. The Senate Bill 83 has been passed.
Representative Geithner.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Members, I move the second Geithner Amendment to the Committee of the Whole and ask for a yes vote.
Is there any further discussion on the second Geithner amendment to the report of the Committee of the Whole? Seeing none, Mr. Randall, please open the machine and members, please vote. Please close the machine. With 30 aye votes, 35 no votes, and no excused, the second Geithner amendment is lost. Representative Holtorf, that's a $5 fine. Mr. Randall, please read the first Williams amendment.
Representative Williams moved to amend the report of the Committee on Diversity action taken by the committee and not adopting the following Williams Amendment L007 to Senate Bill 83 show sudden pass. And Senate Bill 83 has been passed.
Representative Williams.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I move the Williams Amendment and ask for a yes vote.
Representative Herod.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I ask for a no vote. This provides immunity where there currently isn't in law. I ask for a no vote on this amendment.
Is there any further discussion? Seeing none, the question before us is the first Williams Amendment to the report of the Committee of the Whole. Mr. Randall, please open the machine and members, please vote. Please close the machine. With 32 aye votes, 33 no votes, the amendment is lost. Please read the second Williams Amendment.
Representative Williams moved to amend the report of the Committee on Diversity action taken by the committee and not adopting the following Williams Amendment L009 to Senate Bill 83 show sudden pass. Senate Bill 83 has been passed.
Representative Williams.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I move the second Williams Amendment and ask for a yes vote.
Is there any further discussion? Representative Herod.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I ask for a no vote on this amendment. Excuse me. Thank you, Madam Speaker. I ask for a no vote on this amendment. This amendment, we believe that everyone should have access to justice. This bill would allow some access to justice and not others. So I ask for a no vote on this amendment.
Is there any further discussion on the second Williams Amendment to the report of the Committee of the Whole? Seeing none, Mr. Randall, please open the machine and members, please vote. Please close the machine. With 30 aye votes, 35 no votes, and no excused, the second Williams Amendment to the report of the Committee of the Whole is lost. That brings us to the report of the Committee of the Whole. Mr. Randall, please open the machine, and members, please vote. Please close the machine. With 40 aye votes and 25 no votes, the report of the Committee of the Whole is adopted. That brings us to announcements and introductions. Representative Crafthart.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Okay, I have a special announcement. There's a change in the schedule this afternoon for Business Affairs and Labor, because I know you all are coming. We will not be hearing House Bill 1306 today. We'll hear that another day.
Representative Eskar.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Members, you may be having a rumbling tummy if you're looking for something for lunch. Join over 25 anti-hunger organizations for lunch today. They're here. They've probably been sending in cards, but I know a lot of us were listening to what was happening at the well. They would love to chat with you. They are at the Masonic Temple across the street from 12 to 1 today if you're looking for a place for lunch to have a good conversation with members of your community.
Representative Singer.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. House Public Health Care and Human Services Committee, we will see you in room 112 today to hear House Bills 1302, 1317, and Senate Bill 87. We will be meeting we'll see you 5 minutes before noon, 5 before high noon. We'll see you there.
Representative Herod.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. The Art Caucus members, all of those who love your local arts, we will be meeting today at noon in room 112. Members of Legal Services, we will meet tomorrow morning at 8 a.m. We will be hearing the very exciting Rule Review Bill, as well as expenses and proposals to repeal statutes. So we will meet at 8 a.m. in 107. Members of the Finance Committee, there will be changes to the agenda tomorrow upon adjournment. We will not be hearing, members, we will not be hearing Senate Bill 21, House Bill 1303, and House Bill 1304. They will be moved to next week. Thank you.
Representative Gray.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I just want to let you all know I received permission from the Majority Leader, and I will not be here on March 27th. So I will miss you all dearly.
All right, members, you're free to go. We're going to read reports of committees of reference. Mr. Randall, please read reports.
Committee on Business Affairs and Labor. After Chairs the Mayor's the committee rates following House Bill 1285 be as follows. Next amendment to be referred to the Committee on Finance. Favor recommendation. Senate Bill 32 be referred to the Committee whole. Favor recommendation. Committee on Education. After Chairs the Mayor's the committee following House Bill 1058 be as follows. Next amendment to be referred to the Committee whole. Favor recommendation. Senate Bill 14 be referred to the Committee whole. Favor recommendation. Committee on Health and Insurance. After Chairs the Mayor's the committee following House Bill 1232 be referred to the Committee on Appropriations. Committee on Judiciary. After Chairs the Mayor's the committee following House Bill 1291 be as follows. Next amendment to be referred to the Committee whole. Favor recommendation. House Bill 1307 be as follows. Next amendment to be referred to the Committee whole. Favor recommendation. Senate Bill 16 be postponed indefinitely. Committee on State Veterans and Military Affairs. After Chairs the Mayor's the committee recommends following Senate Bill 136 be referred to the Committee whole. Favor recommendation. House Bill 1149 be amended as follows. Next amendment to be referred to the Committee on Appropriations with favor recommendation. Committee on Transportation and Local Government. After Chairs the Mayor's the recommends following House Bill 1129 be postponed indefinitely. House Bill 1281 be referred to the Committee whole. Favor recommendation. House Bill 1310 be postponed indefinitely. House Senate Bill 56 be amended as follows. Next amendment to be referred to the Committee on Appropriations favor recommendation. Senate Bill 152 be referred to the Committee whole. Favor recommendation.
Printing report.
Chief Clerk reports.
Printing
following.
report will be printed in the journal. Signing of bills, resolutions, and memorials.
The Speaker has signed.
Signing of bills, resolutions, and memorials will be printed in the journal. Assistant Majority Leader Kennedy.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I move the House stand in recess until later today.
Seeing no objection, the House will be in recess till later today.